June 6, 1944. D-Day, the largest amphibious invasion in military history. While we know the broad strokes of this pivotal moment, the Normandy landings contain countless stories that seem too incredible to be true. Stories of ingenious deception, extraordinary courage, and miraculous survival. Today, we're diving into 3 remarkable tales from that fateful day. You'll hear about an army of phantom soldiers that never existed, a female journalist who defied military orders to become history's witness, and a Catholic chaplain who survived against impossible odds to save the lives of countless men. These aren't just footnotes in history. These are the hidden threads that helped change the course of World War II. Let's explore what really happened on those blood-soaked beaches and in the dark French countryside behind enemy lines. Imagine you're a German commander stationed along the French coast in the early hours of June 6th. Suddenly, your radio crackles with reports of paratroopers landing miles from the beaches. Gunfire erupts in multiple locations. Your intelligence suggests a massive airborne assault is underway, but something doesn't quite add up. What you don't know is that you've just fallen victim to one of the most brilliant military deceptions in history, Operation Titanic. As part of the larger Operation Fortitude deception plan, Allied forces had spent months creating an elaborate illusion. The crown jewel of this ruse? An army of dummy paratroopers nicknamed Rupert by the British and Oscar by the Americans. On the night of June 5th, the Royal Air Force dropped approximately 500 of these 3-foot-tall burlap dolls across Normandy, miles away from where real Allied paratroopers were actually landing. These weren't simple scarecrows. Each dummy was stuffed with sand and straw, designed to look convincingly realistic as it descended through the darkness. But the deception went even deeper. Many of these dummies were equipped with small explosive charges set on timers. When they hit the ground, they would detonate and burst into flames, giving the appearance of paratroopers destroying their parachutes to avoid detection. Some carried devices called pintails, noisemakers that simulated the sound of rifle fire crackling across the French countryside. To make the illusion complete, British Special Air Service commandos jumped alongside the dummies. These real soldiers hit the ground and immediately began playing recordings of men shouting, gunfire, and the general chaos of an airborne assault. They created a symphony of warfare where none truly existed. The results were spectacular. German units scrambled to respond to these phantom invasions. The 905th Grenadier Regiment was diverted away from Omaha Beach and the actual drop zones of the 101st Airborne Division. Precious German reserves rushed to investigate these ghost armies, leaving the real landing zones more vulnerable. By the time German soldiers discovered the trick and found the burned remains of burlap dummies scattered across the Norman fields, it was too late. The actual Allied forces had secured their positions. General Hans Speidel, deceived by the initial reports, had ordered a decreased alert level just as the real invasion was underway. Operation Titanic was just one part of a massive deception campaign that included inflatable tanks in England, fake radio traffic, and double agents feeding false intelligence to Berlin. This web of lies convinced Hitler that the main invasion would come at Pas de Calais, over 150 miles from Normandy. German forces remained concentrated there, waiting for an attack that would never come, even weeks after D-Day had succeeded. Few of these cloth soldiers survived the war. Today, original Rupert dummies are rare treasures, displayed in museums from New Orleans to Normandy. One sold at auction in 2017 for £2,500. These humble burlap sacks had helped save thousands of Allied lives. Martha Gellhorn was furious. One of the most respected war correspondents of her generation, she had covered the Spanish Civil War, witnessed the rise of Hitler, and reported from the front lines across Europe. But on June 6, 1944, as the greatest military operation in history unfolded, she was stuck in London. The reason? Military authorities had banned women from covering the D-Day invasion. All 500 accredited correspondents were men. Making matters worse, her estranged husband, Ernest Hemingway, had stolen her position at Collier's magazine as their official D-Day correspondent. He would get the cover story. She would get nothing. But Martha Gellhorn was not a woman who accepted defeat easily. When she learned the invasion was underway, she immediately left the Ministry of Information briefing and headed for Southampton. Her plan was audacious, potentially career-ending, and completely brilliant. At the docks, a military policeman stopped her. What was she doing in a restricted area? Gellhorn, thinking quickly, told him she was there to interview nurses for Collier's magazine. The guard, seeing nothing threatening about a woman doing a story on nurses, let her pass. She walked onto the hospital ship HMHS Prague and locked herself in a bathroom. For hours, she waited in that cramped lavatory, her heart pounding every time she heard footsteps outside. Finally, late that night, the ship's engines rumbled to life. The anchor lifted. They were crossing the English Channel. She had done it. The Prague was the first hospital ship to reach Normandy, arriving at Omaha Beach early on the morning of June 7th. Gellhorn emerged from her hiding place and immediately began working. She assisted as a stretcher-bearer, helped interpret for wounded German prisoners, found water and food for soldiers from multiple nations, and administered blood plasma to the dying. What she witnessed was horrific beyond imagination. "It will be hard to tell you of the wounded. There were so many of them," she later wrote. The converted pleasure ship filled with broken bodies, 422 hospital beds, quickly overwhelmed by the casualties streaming in from bloody Omaha, where 2,400 Americans had fallen. On June 8th, Gellhorn did something her celebrity husband never managed. She went ashore. Wading through waist-deep water with a medical team, she walked onto Omaha Beach while it was still under fire. She stumbled up a rocky road through apple-sized pebbles, carefully following the white tape that marked the narrow mine-cleared path. She later wrote about the surreal beauty of that terrible place, the sweet smell of summer grass, a smell of cattle and peace and sun that reminded her of a world before war. She described the violently busy shore, the tremendous effort to save lives amid the chaos of death. Meanwhile, Ernest Hemingway never actually set foot on French soil on D-Day. He watched from a landing craft and didn't reach shore until weeks later. Yet his story, Voyage to Victory, ran on the cover of Collier's July 22nd issue, prominently featuring the famous author with Allied soldiers. Gellhorn's article appeared on August 5th, buried inside the magazine, with no mention of her illegal journey. But her reporting was deeper, more visceral, more honest. She had scooped Hemingway completely, becoming the only woman to report from the Normandy beaches on D-Day itself. When she returned to England, military police arrested her. Her punishment? She was sent to a nurses' training camp and forbidden from crossing to France again. But by then, her story was filed. The damage, from the military's perspective, was done. Gellhorn never looked back. She divorced Hemingway, continued reporting through Korea and Vietnam, and at age 81, covered the U.S. invasion of Panama. She forbade Hemingway's name from being spoken in her presence. As she told interviewers, "I was a writer before I met him, and I have been a writer since." Father Francis Sampson was terrified. The 32-year-old Catholic chaplain of the 501st Parachute Infantry Regiment sat in a C-47 transport plane over the English Channel, wearing over 120 pounds of equipment. "Frankly, I did not know when I signed up for the airborne that chaplains would be expected to jump from an airplane in flight," he later admitted. "No pair of knees shook more than my own, nor any heart ever beat faster in times of danger." At 1:15 a.m. on June 6th, Father Sampson jumped into the darkness over Normandy with 13,000 other paratroopers from the 82nd and 101st Airborne Divisions. Almost immediately, everything went wrong. Instead of landing on solid ground, he plunged into the Douve River. The massive weight of his equipment, including his precious mask kit, dragged him under. With anti-aircraft fire lighting up the sky and bullets slicing through the water around him, Father Sampson frantically cut away his pack with a knife. The current pulled at him. He struggled to unbuckle his parachute before it became a death shroud. Just as he felt his strength failing, a miraculous gust of wind caught his parachute and dragged him toward shallower water. He made it to the riverbank, gasping, soaked, and alive. His first thought wasn't for his own safety. He dove back into that dark, cold river multiple times, searching desperately for his mass kit. Under heavy enemy fire, amid explosions and chaos, he finally found it. For the next 3 weeks, Father Sampson became a legend. He moved constantly through the combat zone, attending to wounded Americans and German prisoners alike, hearing confessions, administering last rites, and offering Mass whenever possible. His faith and courage inspired even the most hardened soldiers. On the afternoon of D-Day, a small force of American paratroopers was forced to evacuate their position at a French farmhouse as Germans advanced. The building sheltered 14 seriously wounded men who couldn't be moved. Despite strong urging otherwise, Father Sampson chose to stay behind with them. For 2 days, he remained in that farmhouse as it came under intense German fire. During one artillery barrage that lasted 4 hours, 3 shells hit the building directly. Each time, Father Sampson threw his body across the wounded to protect them from debris and shrapnel. He made trip after trip across a shell-swept courtyard to check on the most critically injured men. When one shell destroyed an adjacent room, killing 2 men instantly, he tried to dig them out from the rubble with his bare hands. A tracer bullet struck him, causing a second-degree burn, but he refused to stop caring for the wounded. Eventually, German troops overran the position. 2 soldiers dragged Father Sampson outside and raised their rifles to execute him. In that moment, certain he was about to die, his mind went blank. Instead of reciting my act of contrition, the usual prayer for the forgiveness of sins, I continued to repeat the Catholic blessing said before a meal, he recalled. A German non-commissioned officer stepped forward. He was Catholic. Noticing the red cross on Father Sampson's arm and the crucifix around his neck, he stopped the execution. The priest was brought for interrogation, found to be a harmless chaplain, and released. He walked back to the farmhouse and continued caring for the wounded until American forces recaptured the position. Father Sampson's heroism didn't end there. He later helped find and save Fitz Nyland, the real-life inspiration for Saving Private Ryan, a soldier whose 3 brothers had been killed in combat. He jumped into Holland, where he again narrowly escaped capture. At the Battle of the Bulge in December 1944, he was finally captured and spent 6 months in a German prison camp near Berlin. Even in captivity, he ministered to fellow prisoners, insisting on staying with enlisted men rather than accepting the relative comfort of the officers' section. He was liberated by Russian tanks in April 1945. General Dwight Eisenhower recommended Father Sampson for the Medal of Honor, but General George Marshall determined it wasn't appropriate for non-combatants like chaplains to receive it. Instead, Father Sampson received the Distinguished Service Cross, the second highest award in the American military. After the war, Father Sampson continued serving. He made a combat jump in Korea, served through Vietnam, and eventually became Chief of Chaplains of the U.S. Army with the rank of Major General. He spent every Christmas with troops in Vietnam and never tired of visiting wounded soldiers in hospitals. Father Francis Sampson died of cancer on January 28, 1996. At age 83, he was mourned by men who had served in 3 wars, all of whom remembered the chaplain who literally put his body between them and death. Throughout his life, he insisted his survival on D-Day was the work of his guardian angel. Considering what he lived through, it's hard to argue with that assessment. 3 stories: a phantom army of burlap soldiers, a female journalist locked in a bathroom, a priest who drowned and lived, who faced execution and survived, who jumped from planes into the gates of hell and returned to tell the tale. These weren't the generals planning the invasion, or the admirals commanding the fleets. They were the hidden heroes of D-Day, the ones whose stories remind us that history isn't just made by the famous names we remember. It's made by people who refuse to accept the word impossible, who risk everything for truth, who throw their bodies across the wounded when the shells fall. Their courage helped turn the tide of the greatest war in human history. Their stories deserve to be told, remembered, and honored. If you enjoyed learning about these incredible D-Day tales, please subscribe to our channel for more untold stories from history. Like this video, share it with friends who love history, and let us know in the comments which story amazed you the most. Thank you for watching, and remember, history is always more incredible than we imagine.